Hello, everyone. This is Lindsay Firestone Gruber, and I want to officially welcome you to today's webinar, Pro Bono and the Inclusive Leader. I am so thrilled to have you all here with us today. And in order to kick us off, I want to give a few introductions, have the chance to share what our day will look like together here as we move forward, and then have the chance to dig in. So first, what brought you here today is often the shared knowledge that for more than the last decade, companies have been truly tapping into the power of pro bono service as a way to accelerate talent and engage employees, and most importantly, to help lift up and support the communities in which we all live and work. But increasingly, there's an opportunity now on the corporate side to think about ways to create more innovative, inclusive experiences. And what brings us here today is the chance to talk about how pro bono work can further enhance these inclusion and diversity efforts. So I am so pleased to be here with you today with leaders from Deloitte in order to start to unpack these characteristics of strong inclusion and social impact strategies, and together explore how pro bono service can really help companies develop inclusive leadership behaviors while supporting the nonprofits that we're all working to build and support together with more inclusive societies. So as some of you heard me mention, as you joined, you have been automatically muted, so you don't need to worry about the audio as you go through. But I did want to mention that we also sourced questions from you as you were registering for the webinar, and we've incorporated them throughout today's webinar. So I hope that questions you have top of mind will be answered as we engage our panelists in today's discussion, and we'll provide the opportunity for follow-up as we wrap up the webinar today. So with that, I would like to introduce today's illustrious panelists who we are thrilled to have together today. I'm going to start with Dr. Terri Cooper, who is the Chief Inclusion Officer for Deloitte US and a member of Deloitte's Management Committee. In this capacity, Dr. Cooper spearheads Deloitte's strategy to engage professionals throughout the talent lifecycle and foster a culture where everyone feels that they can connect, belong, and grow. Dr. Cooper believes each and every individual has a role to play in cultivating an inclusive culture and is passionate about instilling Deloitte's 6 signature traits of an inclusive leader, which you will learn much about over the course of today's webinar. In addition, Dr. Cooper frequently participates at industry conferences and client events, sharing Deloitte's perspective on advancing inclusion in organizations today, and we are thrilled to have her as part of today's discussion as well. Doug Marshall is the National Managing Director of Corporate Citizenship for Deloitte. He and his team in corporate citizenship seek to harness the collective power of Deloitte's people and networks to address pressing societal issues, help change lives, and shape the future. They also aim to foster a more inclusive, prepared workforce, resulting in more economic opportunity for individuals, growth for employers, and better outcomes for society. And to that end, they focus on issues in education and workforce development where Deloitte's people and capabilities can really drive meaningful impact. And we are so glad to have you with us today, Doug. And lastly, on the Deloitte side, and certainly not least, Isabel Chirase, who is a senior consultant in finance and enterprise performance, where she focuses on enabling finance organizations with digital, scalable, and emerging solutions. In addition to that role, Isabel serves as the national co-lead for Step Up, Deloitte's global skills-based volunteer organization that offers hundreds of practitioners at all levels opportunities to develop core project delivery skills while solving complex challenges for local nonprofits. And we're so thrilled to have the chance to learn more from Isabel today. And I will then introduce myself and the Taproot Foundation. As you heard, my name is Lindsay Firestone Gruber. I will be your moderator for today as we move throughout this discussion. And I'm the president and CEO of the Taproot Foundation. Taproot itself is a nonprofit organization with a focus on helping to ensure that all the organizations out there working to improve society are armed with the support they need through pro bono service. Whether that's marketing, IT, HR, strategy, any variety of needs, we work to make sure that these organizations are armed to be able to thrive and achieve their missions. And with that, we are so pleased to be able to dig into this discussion today, which we truly believe can help enhance the way that pro bono service becomes an increasingly integrated part of efforts across the workforce, and focusing today on this topic in particular of inclusion and inclusive leadership. So with that, I would love to turn to have a chance to engage with Terri first. Terri, in particular, given your impressive role of being the Chief Inclusion Officer, I would love to start hearing from you how it is that you define inclusion and what your take is on why this is so important in today's workplace and in the workplace of tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. And it's an absolute joy to be on the call on the presentation today. I think one of the key things we need to sort of bear in mind is that terminology around diversity and inclusion, and the two are used interchangeably a lot of the time. And I really wanted to spend a couple of seconds to make individuals aware of how I sort of distinguish between the two. We know that in this new age, it's really important that whatever team that we have, that we really want to bring the best thinking, a really diverse thinking. Diverse thinking is really the new frontier. And that means that we really need to think about leveraging different skills, making sure that we have individuals that we're working with that have different backgrounds, that perhaps have different social economic backgrounds as well, different attributes and the perspectives that they bring to problem solving. And so creating a diverse team as much as possible is really around leveraging not only diversity from a demographics perspective, but also really making sure that we're driving cognitive diversity as well. And you can certainly have diversity without having inclusion, but you can't have inclusion without diversity. And what I mean by that is inclusion is then saying, right, I have this amazing diverse team, but I want to make sure that each person brings their unique perspective and that they're encouraged to be their authentic selves, know that they're valued and can have an integral contribution to all of the discussions, the challenges, etc. And I quite often use the analogy that diversity is like being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And so when we think about why this is so important, we've done a lot of work really looking at the diversity and inclusion revolution. And it's very clear that organizations that have an inclusive culture, that are really bringing that diverse level of thinking to everything that they are focused on, are twice as likely to meet or exceed financial targets. They're 3 times as likely to be high performing and 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile. And so as a result of that, that diverse thinking can truly enhance innovation, but perhaps more importantly, it can also reduce risk by about 1/3. And that's really important from the point of view of bringing that breadth of thought to the table in order to manage an overall business. But it's not only from the point of view of that business imperative as we think about how we're bringing that diverse level of thinking and inclusiveness to each of the challenges that we face. Inclusion is really also a priority for talent. And again, at Deloitte, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how do we unleash the power of inclusion. And certainly from the point of view, what we know is that 80% of individuals will really take into account how inclusive an organization is before they will choose an employer. And almost 40% would leave their organization for a more inclusive one, whereas just under 25% of respondents would indicate that they have already left their organizations for one that would demonstrate more of an inclusive culture. And so when we take that into account, it's really important for everyone, whether you want to attract, retain, and advance individuals, you really need to have that diverse workforce. And you really need to think about ways in which you can strengthen that culture in order to really provide that environment, as Lindsay was saying earlier, at Deloitte, what we really believe is where individuals can connect, belong, and grow. And one of the things that we've done there is it's important for us to think about what are those behaviors, and we've really focused around what we call our 6 Cs, our 6 inclusive traits. And this is really an expectation that we have of all of our junior colleagues as well as all the way through to our most senior leaders, that everybody is responsible for really developing that culture, and as a result of that, enable us to benefit from driving more inclusivity across the board.
That's so helpful to hear, Terri, and I'm really looking forward to spending some time digging in on those 6 signature traits as well. You know, ahead of getting there, Isabel, we had this great opportunity with you on the line to hear a little bit from your perspective now, from your experience as an employee. Do you have some thoughts to share around what that has looked like for you?
Definitely. I would say, like, as an employee, Sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of echo. Is this a little better? Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
So I would say as an employee, I think of inclusion is something both really visible and then also somewhat invisible. And so like just at the surface, visible inclusion for me is that, you know, I'm a Black woman and I would like my organization to have people that look like me and also look like people, you know, representative of the world that we live in. But it's also really important that I see people who don't look like me, because I really recognize that I have gained a lot from people with diverse viewpoints. But I also think of inclusion a little bit more invisible and aligning to what Terri was saying around like being invited to dance. So like the mutual respect and like people being really open-minded and wanting to collaborate so that we could be effective. Like, I think it's really frustrating to be in these like really hyper-competitive environments when we're all trying to accomplish very similar goals. And I think maybe it's talked about a lot more in millennial circles, but, you know, I think we're just all really aware of how much time we spend either physically at work or connected to our colleagues in some way. And so I think like back to this idea of, you know, 80% of people really needing to feel inclusive in that workplace. Yeah, I need to feel included to also be fulfilled and also to like be my best employee, and honestly, even just for mental health. So yeah, I think it's sort of like the visible, do I see inclusion, but also like, is there respect and openness to collaborate?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure there were a lot of heads nodding behind computer screens in hearing that analogy as well, because it speaks so clearly to what the experience of so many folks really is across a variety of environments. So picking up on this idea of these signature traits, of thinking about what it means to have inclusion and have an inclusive leader, Terri, I'd love to hear a little more from you about the research Deloitte has done and understanding what these are and what's so critical about these traits as it relates to inclusion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I mentioned before, you know, we've really identified 6 traits that we truly believe are imperative for people to behave as inclusive leaders. And as you'll see here from the slide, they're really the 6 C's. And the first one I really think is critically important is around commitment. We know that businesses are becoming more and more committed to actually driving a more inclusive environment. But the only way we're really going to achieve that is if each of us as individuals actually embrace our own personal commitment to inclusion. And by that we mean the ability for each of us to treat everyone with fairness and respect. You know, Isabel really reiterated that when she was talking about what was so important for her. It's around that ability where we can really foster an environment where every one of the team members really feels as though they can be themselves, that they can model their own unique authenticity and ultimately have that mutual respect. And honestly, that does have a significant impact on an individual's well-being and mental health if they really feel through the commitment of a leader or through the commitment of a colleague that we're really embracing them as an individual. The second one linked to that is really around collaboration. You know, and as I've mentioned previously, we can create a diverse team. You can bring all of those different thoughts and different, you know, have individuals with different backgrounds come to the table. But the only way you're really going to influence that inclusive culture, or the only way you're really going to ensure that everybody feels as though they can dance, is really creating an environment of collaboration. And to that end, where you really create those teams that have that diversity in thinking, but they're all, again, as Isabel was saying, that there's mutual respect and that everybody is listening to everyone else. And in particular, if somebody happens to be somewhat quieter, more introverted, that you're actually providing an environment where everyone can bring their thoughts forward and feel comfortable in a respectful environment. And one of the ways that we can actually ensure that we address that collaboration, not only showing our personal commitment, but our collaboration, is also around being curious. If we spend the time to actually really understand the uniqueness of each and every one of us, and to think about the experiences that we've had through our lives, and to actually really ensure that we can listen attentively and value the viewpoints of others. That is really another fundamental component of driving that inclusive culture. And perhaps really tied really closely to that is our ability to be culturally intelligent. So if we really want to drive that incredible collaboration, we need to recognize that there are cultural differences and how individuals participate in conversations are going to vary. Certain cultures will dictate that if the most senior person in the room, that you really need to be respectful and to an extent wait for them to actually invite you into the conversation. And so at times, maybe we observe certain individuals that aren't contributing as much as we would have liked, and maybe it's partly because we haven't created that environment for them to feel comfortable that it's okay for them to speak up. And so being aware of the cultural differences is really critically important. The fifth one is around cognizance of bias. And, there's a lot of talk that's happening right now around being aware of your unconscious bias as well as your conscious bias, so that decisions can be made in a transparent and a consistent and an informed manner. And to me, that is critically important, and obviously completely embrace all of the work that's been done recently around making people aware not only of their conscious but of their unconscious bias is really key. But again, it's great if we're aware, but unless we have courage, which is the last of the 6 C's, to actually call out bad behaviors, to engage in tough conversations when necessary, and to identify opportunities to be more inclusive by taking ownership to engage others and being allies, then we can't necessarily move the ball forward. So our research is very clear that these 6 are so interconnected from the point of view that unless you have a commitment to inclusion, you're not necessarily going to spend the time to focus on your unconscious bias. That if you're committed, you're more likely to be curious. If you're trying to drive greater collaboration, you're probably more aware from a cultural intelligence perspective, but also that you have that courage to call out those unnecessary behaviors. So that's really a summary of where we are, Lindsay, and I hope that gives us sort of a good background to those traits and why they're so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure so many folks on the line are probably already beginning to start making these connections between what can really come to life through the experience of pro bono service opportunities and these traits and experiences you've just described. But ahead of getting there, I'd love to turn to you for a moment, because one of the great benefits of having this group on the line is that we get the chance to have real-life examples of what this looks like through Deloitte's own programming. And Deloitte has obviously long been a leader in this space and really driving that impactful pro bono and those skills-based programs. And I'd love just to start by kind of setting the stage here a little bit for folks and hear from you about why allowing people to use their skills for good is such a priority for Deloitte.
Sure, happy to speak to that, Lindsay, and just want to say hello to everybody and pleasure to be with you all today. So in terms of your question, I'd say there's 2 main reasons we make it a priority. And the first is that making a positive impact on society and in our communities is really a core element of Deloitte's purpose. We aspire to make an impact that matters for our clients, for our people, and importantly, our communities. And that purpose is something that's very central to the firm in who we are, and it guides our actions, including our commitment to pro bono. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a second. But the second reason is that enabling our people to use their skills through pro bono for the greater good of our communities also delivers real business benefits to the firm. So let me talk about each of those in a little more detail, starting with our purpose and social impact, where we really are huge fans of pro bono because we believe it's our imperative to leverage the collective intelligence and ambition of our people, who are probably our greatest asset, along with our networks of clients and nonprofits and communities together to collectively, develop innovative solutions around society's pressing issues. And in fact, pro bono is probably the key way, and one of the most important ways anyway, that we can enable our people to apply their skills and expertise, helping nonprofits address issues facing their organizations, taking a bunch of the skills and capabilities that people have learned and applied in the corporate sector to the nonprofit sector, and ultimately driving better, more positive social outcomes. So, when people do engage in pro bono or skills-based volunteering, we really want them to be able to do this on topics that matter to them, because we see that personal passion and interests are important. And, speaking to some of the things that we've already talked about, we try to have an inclusive approach to this. And we also, at the same time, try to inspire our people to come together around key issues in our communities where we believe our collective capabilities as a firm can have more meaningful impact if we are all working against the same things. And Lindsay, you talked about this a little bit in the intro. One example is our commitment to help build bridges between education and skills, training, and employment. And this is part of a global network ambition across Deloitte that we have to impact 50 million futures in an initiative that we call World Class. And specifically, that comes to life in the US a lot through our pro bono investments with organizations that are helping young people to prepare for college, as well as working with organizations that are working on closing the skills gap and creating pathways to employment, for many more people from different backgrounds. And so through those efforts, we're using the strength of Deloitte and the Deloitte community and our people to help those many more people uncover pathways to greater social and economic opportunities, and hopefully ultimately supporting a stronger, more inclusive and prosperous society. So from a social impact perspective, we really think we bring a lot of value through our pro bono, both when people are doing what they're interested in and when we rally around certain issues. And just, for context, in terms of our belief in this, the value of this program, we're in our 11th year of pro bono service. We see that kind of recipients of pro bono also see the value, with almost 100% of surveyed pro bono clients reporting that the projects meet or exceed their expectations, and importantly, that they would recommend getting pro bono services to other organizations. And then we also see that support from our leaders and demand from our professionals continues to grow. And this past year alone, we collectively spent more than 225,000 hours of time and talent engaged in pro bono work in our communities. So that's the first thing. On the second, it being good for our business, I think this is important as those of you in CSR roles and citizenship roles think about this. In addition to driving social impact, our social investments make an impact on our firm in three ways, and you can see those on the slides here: engaging our talent, enhancing our relationships with clients, and strengthening the firm's brand overall. For example, by helping to address key problems, or by building innovative solutions and thought leadership. And importantly, we design our programs and our pro bono with those objectives in mind. And when we do that right, we're not only driving meaningful social impact that we talked about, but also business impact at the same time. We don't see that has to be a trade-off. And you can refer to this as the concept of shared value, or doing well by doing good. I think in the case of pro bono, it's very, very true that we can do those things simultaneously, and being able to make that case can be really helpful when building support in the firm, for either new investment or ongoing investment. Those are the benefits that we think about as Deloitte, as a professional services firm, and I recognize that the exact way that would come to life for other firms would be different, particularly in different industries. But we see all of those benefits from pro bono, and in particular, we see great impact on our people. And those benefits, we think, translate, to all types of businesses. And from a people perspective, we viewed for many years that pro bono is a great way to develop skills of our people, and also enables them to pursue passions and have a sense of purpose. And more recently, we've been excited to understand that pro bono is really helping us develop leaders that, can not only do the work and step up into different roles that they might not have had before, but also cultivating leaders that are inclusive and lead by example, since that's what we're talking about here. And instead of me kind of just listing out benefits, I want to read to you some of the ways that some of our consultants have described pro bono at Deloitte. First, it combines talent development with purpose and impact. Second, it accelerates training. Third, it's an immersive experience, and because of that, we've seen folks strengthen their current skills, explore and gain skills they can't always exercise on their client projects, and discover and hone their leadership style. And fourth, many of the practitioners that I work with often tell me how they appreciate being a part of a firm that is invested not only in their learning, but also in giving back to the communities where we live and work, a place where they can pursue their passions while growing their careers. And that kind of feedback is great, and it's also pretty broad-based. Last year, nearly all of the surveyed professionals reported, after they had completed their pro bono projects, we survey folks, and they said that they had learned new soft skills, that their job satisfaction increased, and they were more likely to participate in other social impact activities. And those are all at kind of the 90% level. So, we are very committed to pro bono. We see a lot of benefit from it. And as you can tell, we're always excited to talk about it and share what we know about this field.
Yeah, and I so value that, because I think so many people on the line now might be at companies where there is some programming already in place, but there isn't yet much of a relationship between how that programming comes to life and some of the more human resources or talent development opportunities that are connected. And other folks might be on the line who are trying to learn about this connection for the first time, and really being able to hear what this looks like at Deloitte and the ways that you see value, of course, first and foremost from a community impact standpoint, but then how this begins to also cut across the feedback from your folks, and the way you look to help continue to grow that talent is so important. And, along those lines, I think it's a great moment to be able to transition to Isabel, to hear from you, as a participant in these programs. What has been your experience with some of what Doug has described here? What has that been like for you?
Well, the short answer is it's been an awesome experience. I'm super grateful to Terri and her team in talent and inclusion, and Doug with corporate citizenship, and just Deloitte in general for being really open to and supportive of pro bono programs. So for me, pro bono has taken shape in the form of Step Up, which is, as you gave that intro at the very beginning, we do pro bono work as volunteers outside of our normal client-facing work. And so, I tell everybody that asks, I really cannot decouple my experience with Step Up from my experience with Deloitte. Just in the world of consulting, we are matrix. We have different competencies. So you guys heard I work specifically in finance type projects. We're in different offices. We change teams as we change projects. We live in different cities. And so there's just, I think, a lot of opportunity to possibly fall through the cracks. And so for me, being involved in Step Up has just offered me really deep levels of connection that has really transcended as I've changed projects or roles or titles throughout the company. And it's also just been this great sandbox to hone in on my skills, first in delivering pro bono projects, and now in leading Step Up and our national chapters. So I think it's just learning from all these diverse viewpoints to solve complex nonprofit challenges. You take those exact same critical thinking skills and problem solving right back to your clients. And so you immediately get to see the direct benefit of what you're learning on your pro bono projects. And, you're also just I think for me, it's an essential complement to my career. I think everyone on this call and most people are pretty ambitious about what they want in their own personal drive. So I think it's also really important to me that there's this complementary activity where I'm directly applying my talents to something that's measurably impactful. And so, just kind of boiling it down, it makes me feel better about myself. It makes me feel like a balanced person, but that I'm definitely able to demonstrate my learnings from pro bono work to my project teams and my leaders and my clients as well.
That's great. And I think, even that last line alone about what this has been able to mean for you and having it demonstrate itself in such a measurably impactful way is what so many people strive for in creating different types of programming. So I think this is a great moment for us to be able to start bringing all these different components together, thinking about these 6 signature traits that Terri was describing and the elements of participating in pro bono service and the types of skills and competencies that are required in doing that and that can be built through that experience. So with that, I'd love to have the chance to direct a similar question to each of you, starting with you, Terri. If we really think about and reflect on these signature traits of the inclusive leader, what do you see as some of these primary points of connection where there is the opportunity for pro bono service to really directly relate to building these traits of the inclusive leader?
Yeah, sure. So, in my mind, I think one of the most powerful ways that we can reinforce inclusive leadership and actually change behaviors is through experience. And so as an example, I truly believe that pro bono can help to build not only cultural intelligence, but also curiosity, because it really provides our practitioners with an exposure to different types of organizations or interactions with different types of individuals that they wouldn't necessarily or typically have perhaps associated with in the past. And this really helps them to understand the needs of other communities and become a lot more empathetic and really look for ways in which they can truly embrace their inclusive leadership skills. We know that our professionals are very much looking for ways in which we can design our philanthropic activities and our corporate social responsibility activities to really think about how we are looking at those from an inclusive lens. And, we know there have been a number of studies that have been conducted that have found that companies who successfully link their philanthropic and their CSR efforts with their D&I initiatives under a unified strategy are more likely to see success as it relates to the retention of a diverse workforce, as well as really embracing the ability for individuals to feel as though they are having an impact, because that is also so critically important. So one of the things that Deloitte that we really take very seriously and is that we consider when we're interacting with nonprofits that we really want to serve through our pro bono initiatives, that they really do align with our D&I focus. And, the interesting thing is in some of those circumstances or instances, we've actually been able to hire amazing candidates from those organizations, and it's providing some great connection points and some awesome synergies. And so, honestly, Isabel, I think from the point, Lindsay, I think, it's really critical for us to continue to think about how do we bring that alignment. I truly believe that through our pro bono efforts and our social responsibility, we provide greater exposure for all of our professionals for them to really develop not only their cultural intelligence, their curiosity, but it requires different skills from a collaborative perspective. They really, when we're working in these environments, we do need to be very cognizant of any biases that exist and to be courageous in the way that we tackle these challenges, and as a result of that, really build that overall commitment to creating an inclusive lens.
And I think this is a great opportunity now to be able to continue to weave that incredibly helpful overview together with some of what you were also commenting on, Isabel, with your own experiences and what it's meant to be able to collaborate, to lean into that curiosity, commitment, et cetera. So what are ways that you see the connection between these 6 signature traits and the pro bono experiences that you've had?
Yeah, definitely. I would say you can find elements of all of them in the experience of doing pro bono. Specific to Step Up, it's junior employee led, and but people are still really thinking innovatively, and as you've heard quite frequently, having to collaborate to solve very real challenges. These nonprofits it's really, they are social imperatives that they be able to operate in their communities more efficiently, more effectively, whatever their present challenges may be. So I think just to Terri's point around curiosity, you know, now that I am overseeing our 19 chapters, I'm just continually blown away by the outputs that I see from their projects, and the fact that these young people like myself are empowered to really be curious and commit to solving these challenges. And I think it makes us all leaders who will continue to be curious enough to dissect issues, look beyond the surface, and you know, offer solutions that are measurable in the same ways that we're expected to do when we're working with you know, our commercial clients or our, you know, paid clients. And I think another big trait for me is just around the idea of commitment. As a team member and now as a program leader and everybody else in the program, we are committing time outside of our client work to create these teams and to deliver high quality work. It's 100% volunteer work for Step Up specifically. And so for me, it's really challenged me to think about the type of leader I want to be, really focus on building connections with my team members, and then of course Step Up leadership and the PPMD or partner sponsors who are really guiding the program. And so it's both this idea of building followership throughout the program and also interacting with Deloitte leaders to understand how to drive these teams and how to be effective when we deliver. And so, you know, I think I'm always trying to foster an inclusive environment within Step Up, and that is always going to translate to the same, you know, spirit of what I want to bring to my project team.
That's fantastic. And Doug, you know, specifically from the corporate citizenship side, what are some of those areas of overlap that really stand out to you?
Thanks. I'd say, you know, one of the other traits that I'd call out, I think worth mentioning, and perhaps, you know, was some of the original thinking behind why pro bono was good for development for our folks is courage. And I think we see a strong connection between pro bono and that courage attribute, because I think you know, when you put people into pro bono projects, they're powerful. It's really a powerful way to create out of the classroom learning experiences for our talent, and Terri talked about that earlier. But those, you know, and Isabel did just too, if you're stepping up into roles that you're not used to normally playing, you're interacting with organizations in a different way than you might at that current level that you're at in your career at Deloitte. You know, perhaps interacting with more senior people, interacting with people from different cultures. We're putting people in situations, and they're putting themselves in those situations outside of their comfort zone, and that helps them to develop courage in the face of, you know, the unfamiliar. So, you know, for many of our practitioners, it may mean owning a client relationship or working with executives for the first time, you know, at an early stage in their career, learning about a new sector, serving global clients, serving clients in different communities than you would normally do in a different kind of culture. So I think it can really help with the courage attribute as well. And I guess I'd also make a final point, in building a little bit on what Terri was talking about how we prioritize organizations and the issues that we get involved in that align to our D&I focus. You know, so beyond building just the 6 traits inside the firm, we also believe that our pro bono and our social impact programs in general can be an important, you know, vehicle to helping other organizations, nonprofits that are working to build a more inclusive society in a broader sense. And, you know, our social impact and our pro bono is particularly focused, as I mentioned earlier, on supporting organizations that are working to close opportunity gaps in education, skills, and employment. And those are gaps that we see that are widening as the skills and capabilities that are required to succeed are changing with rapid advances in technology and digitization. So, you know, while those changes in our economy and what work looks like is creating lots of opportunity, it's also leaving millions of people at risk of being left behind. And that's something collectively we need to change, and Deloitte wants to play a role in making happen. So by aligning our pro bono strategy with our inclusion strategy, we're able, I believe, to more effectively advance both in a meaningful way, and ultimately collaborate with other companies and other nonprofits and governments to build to foster a more inclusive, productive society and a more innovative workforce and economy. And our success depends on that as a firm, and that's another form, if you will, of shared value, and another reason that pro bono is such a priority for us.
Mm-hmm. It makes so much sense, and it's so great to have a forum like this where we have the chance to hear candidly from each of you across the various and frankly overlapping aspects of what you do and your focus within the company and outside as well. With so many folks on the line that are also thinking about this and wondering how they can really start to accelerate some of the inclusion efforts within their own company, really continue to lean into the benefit that pro bono service can have in addition to the critical impact on the community. I'm curious to hear from you what one piece of advice is that you would give to someone on the line, taking notes and thinking about what might be helpful for them as they try to accelerate these efforts within the company. Doug, piggybacking what you were just thinking about, it'd be great to start with you.
Sure, happy to. I guess the headline for me is, if you see who's on the call here from our side, this isn't just citizenship led, it's not inclusion led, it's not just our employee led, but I think it's important to work together. So that would be the advice that I would give. I think that over the last few years, we've seen how important it is to invest in developing particularly strong relationships across talent and inclusion in Terri's world and our citizenship and CSR world, and then doing that together with our employees in a way that it all comes together. And I don't think it's just about me providing updates to Terri or sharing ROI statistics. Not to say that those things aren't important, but I think it's important for CSR professionals in particular to work with your talent leadership and your inclusion leadership and understand how can CSR or citizenship or these pro bono programs or other programs that you might have, how can they support, augment, where do you find the synergies between that and what the inclusion and talent group is looking to do? There are goals that we have as an organization from an inclusion and talent perspective, and there are important ways that CSR and pro bono can contribute to us achieving those goals. In an ideal world, I think, as Terri and I have done, we identify shared goals or challenges that we work on together, and try and move away from only delivering things in our own silos. Is not to say that pro bono is the solution to inclusion, but it can be something that complements all the other stuff that Terri's doing. And if we do it right, we're driving that business value to the firm, and we're not guessing about what value we're driving. We're working with Terri to figure out what that looks like. So that would be my advice. Work together on this, come up with strategies, and understand what benefits you're trying to drive, and hopefully do that together in a way that allows us to create those kind of synergies.
That's great, and such a great representation, as you mentioned, with who's on the line today, being able to speak to this. Isabel, what about from your point of view? Any final piece of advice that you would think for others as they consider this overlap and these opportunities?
Yeah, I think just speaking to all levels, whether you consider yourself a junior practitioner or employee at your company or one of the leaders trying to drive inclusion strategies, I think that you can think about it really structured and in a very measured way, which is important. But I also think, don't let that keep you from stopping, right? Because pro bono doesn't have to be over-engineered initially. I think if at any company, if you ask employees if they're interested in collaborating and using their talents to serve their community, you're going to get most of the people or several people raising their hands, and they'll probably bring ideas around how to execute that or how that might fit within the context of your company. So, you know, the way that we've made Step Up work is really complementary to skills, a consultancy and client service work. But I think even if that's not the business you're in, your employees will have great ideas on how to have inclusive pro bono and social impact work, and will want to lead it and drive it as well. So I think you can expect people to run with it if you just sort of give them the support and the reinforcement to do so.
Yeah, I'm sure that's really welcome news for many folks to hear who themselves are under-resourced and thinking about bringing programs to life, and recognizing that even just the opportunity for employees to step up, no pun intended, to be a part of building and driving this programming in and of itself is a valuable experience that can also help move these pieces forward. And Terri, to bring it back now, full circle with you, any final observations you'd share as this conversation continues to move forward in the field?
So I would say, I think the critical thing for us, and Doug mentioned a lot of this, is really from the point of view of us working really closely together and really thinking about how we're intentional around the sort of the impact that we really want to have, both from a social impact and from our corporate social responsibility perspective, and how we can tie that back into our ability to really augment our inclusive culture, but also demonstrate a more of an inclusive culture with the individuals that we're working very closely with, whether it's not-for-profits, etc. So to me, it's really important around, I think there's always the challenge where there are so many ideas, so many different ways in which we can help, and you could potentially boil the ocean. But really think about where can we have the biggest impact, and how are we actually affecting society at large? Because, you know, with everything that's happening these days, I truly believe that the more that we can focus around really making everybody feel valued, every individual feel as though they can be their authentic selves, and that we provide the environment through our pro bono work and also through our work internally at Deloitte, where individuals can grow and can reach their best expectations. And so to me, it's really being intentional around what are your overall goal and mission is going to be, and how you can bring all of those traits together. You know, as Isabel was mentioning and Doug was mentioning, you know, it's really, for us, it's our ability for our practitioners to really have other vehicles where they can really hone and grow their inclusiveness as a leader. But it's important from my perspective that we're very intentional around what, you know, really what we're trying to achieve, and how do we measure that success in the impact that we're having from our corporate social responsibility perspective as well.
I think that really brings these pieces together so nicely. And, you know, touching on one of the many helpful things you mentioned, you know, in helping to make sure that everyone feels valued and is valued, which all the examples you've provided have really helped demonstrate. And I'll add, you know, from Taproot's perspective, as we look out to the field, as we look to the future as well, there are two things, in addition to many others, that stand out in particular. And, you know, one is that, of course, this topic of inclusion is a very critically broad topic that relates to so many key issues and variables, not the least of which, of course, are the organizations that Deloitte's pro bono service and Taproot's work looks to serve, who themselves are trying to enhance and build a more inclusive and equitable society, and thinking about how these different traits also relate to leaders advancing that work directly as well. And the other that is connected to so many of the pieces that were mentioned here, and I think Doug had touched on specifically too, is what we think of so commonly as this broad subject of the future of work, and how folks within companies and within nonprofit organizations are really needing to think about the skills and competencies that are needed to operate effectively, to achieve everything you want to achieve. And there's such a great and important overlap here as we heard on the line, and even directly for the organizations that pro bono service supports, where they too need to be able to have organizations and leaders that are able to be as effective as possible, which means being as inclusive as possible and having their capacity enhanced through incredibly valuable support like pro bono service. So with that, I want to sincerely thank our colleagues from Deloitte for being a part of this conversation and bringing your candid and helpful insights to the table. I hope for everyone on the line, this has been a chance to really unpack a little bit of what this topic of inclusive leadership really looks like and what it's composed of, and then specifically what it might mean to be able to take advantage of the additional benefit that pro bono service programs can have, of course, in impacting the organizations and communities you're serving, but also in the way you're able to build inclusive leaders within your own company. So I want to say thank you, of course, again, to our panelists, to Dr. Terri Cooper, Doug Marshall, and Isabel Chirase. I want to thank our colleagues at Deloitte for helping to bring this important conversation together. And as I mentioned, this is a conversation that will continue in the field. Specifically, we will together be reaching out to make sure we're sending a recording to all of our webinar registrants and sharing key takeaways in order to make sure that this dialogue continues to move forward in the months to come. And we invite you to follow up and stay tuned for the opportunity to continue providing valuable insights along these lines and really getting specific as we can dig in together to maximize all of these incredibly important pieces of what it means to build a more inclusive society. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Please look to your inboxes for the follow-up that can help move this conversation forward. And we look forward to you joining us very soon for some additional conversations to help advance these important topics.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.